So welcome to the Finance Committee meeting. Tim, thank you for getting your team together and ready to present. I'll just go around the room. Thank you, Councilor Hurst and Councilor Govan for joining. Just go around the room with the staff, with their team and guests, and introduce ourselves. We can start.
Sure, Councilor Tim Sheehan, Chief Development Officer. With me for the presentation this evening is Kathy Bono, who is the Director of Administration and Finance, Jerry McCafferty, who's the Director of Housing, and Tina Quagliato-Sullivan, who is Director of Disaster Recovery and Compliance.
Thank you. Tina, we just saw you yesterday, didn't we? I have you all the time. Hi, Kathy. Hi, Jerry. Hi, can you pronounce your name for me?
Hi, everyone. It's Xiomara.
Xiomara?
Mm-hmm.
Xiomara. Good. We just emailed today, so hi.
Hi. Nice to meet you and connect, of course.
Nice to meet you. I've seen you on other Zooms, but I didn't know who you were with, so it's great to meet you.
Likewise. So I'm the Chief of Staff with the Economic Development Council, and also here on behalf of VVM with Hope, since VVM is now officially part of the EDC, and she couldn't be here. She had another commitment, so I'm stepping in.
Definitely understand and welcome. So we're just going to go ahead and get started with the meeting. This is a finance subcommittee meeting. I think Councilor Allen's calling me, getting an update on some of the funding that comes through the Office of Economic Development. I guess that's housing planning and all those other sub-departments, but we're just going to go ahead and get started. So whoever from the team wants to start, you can just go right ahead.
Let me say, we have some slides to share, so I'm going to share those.
So, Councilor, I'll just tee it up and we'll go into the presentation, okay? Thank you for the opportunity to be with you this afternoon to discuss the annual HUD entitlement grants, which are awarded the city, and how we have deployed that funding to assist the city's low and moderate income residents. We have also included in our presentation today both the Section 108 loan guarantee recently accepted by the City Council and the disaster relief funding, as both of these programs are HUD-related programs as well. This meeting stemmed out of a City Council meeting in which there was some confusion regarding the awareness of the home entitlement grant specifically. Such can be easily understood as the HUD entitlement grants are distinct, and the programs that are derived from the actual grant are usually more commonly known publicly than the actual name of the entitlement grant itself. So the entitlement grant is actually the upper piece, and then there's programs that run under that particular entitlement grant. So our objective this afternoon is to provide the Finance Committee with an in-depth review of each HUD entitlement grant and the associated outreach to the public or the constituencies that particular grant serves, to make known to the community the availability of these funds and the public process associated with their deployment. Kathy is going to start us off with a baseline overview of each of the grants and the associated programming, and address some of the HUD required reporting documents associated with them. So Kath, can you start us off?
Starting on this. So the first slide you'll see are HUD grants, the entitlement programs, which are 1 year annual programs that the city receives direct funding from HUD for. It is a formula that is done in Washington. So the city finds out anywhere from March to the end of May what our entitlement amounts will be. We have listed right now the current FY22 entitlement amounts. The city also has ongoing multi-year grants, which are the disaster recovery, which are also HUD funds. The National Disaster Resilience Competition, which was a competitive process throughout the country. The city was awarded $17 million. And then the LED grant, which is a 3-year grant for $2.3 million that is ongoing. The city also receives annually they call the Continual Care grants, and this current year the funding is $5.6 million. The grant cycle for the entitlement grants is the planning, allocation, and reporting. So the first requirement HUD has is a 5-year consolidated plan. The 5-year consolidated planning process is based on data and public input. The current plan was from 2020 to 2024. That is, we do extensive outreach meetings with roundtables with businesses, nonprofits, residents. It's like a 3 to 4 month planning process before we put together. And that what that 5-year plan does is it spells out our goals and objectives for the next 5 years. The 5 years within that con plan, we have to do annual action plans, which then tells HUD what we're going to use the money they've allocated to us and how that money is going to be used to reach those goals that we've laid out in our 5-year plan. At the end of every fiscal year, at the end of the year of the planning, we then have to do a report to HUD. It's called the CAPER, and that is due by September 30th. And that tells HUD what our accomplishments for that program year and where we are as far as accomplishing the 5-year goals.
So if I could just come back to that slide for 1 minute, just for the council's perspective to kind of make comparisons on this. The consolidated plan would be like the city's capital plan in terms of understanding, you know, long-term, where should the city be applying its entitlement funding and what are the needs that it's specifically addressing. The annual action plan would be like the annual spending plan, and the consolidated annual performance and evaluation report aligns how closely you met your performance goals and objectives that were stated at the outset, and how you tracked meeting the needs that were addressed in the consolidated plan. Thank you.
So the citizen participation is developed during the consolidated plan. For the 5-year consolidated plan. It is how that will reach citizens throughout the city. It is accepted from HUD. It has to be submitted and accepted by HUD during the consolidated plan. It outlines what we will do for outreach. We advertise by mailing, social media, newspapers. We hold public hearings on Facebook, and this is due to COVID. And it outlines the process for accepting and responding to written comments. All communication that we put out is both in English and Spanish. So
can I pause there? Can you go back to that slide, please? Mm-hmm. So as far as the Facebook public hearings, I went on that. And so if folks were to comment on what they thought, it would just be put into the notes, and then you would follow up. You would go back to the notes and get their comments from there.
We do, and we also receive a lot of emails and letters.
And when you did this in public and folks gave comments, was there dialogue between your department and the public?
It's unfortunately, when we did it before COVID and we had public hearings and we tried to make them as accessible as possible, we had very little participation, if any. We, on average, we probably maybe had 20 people at both meetings.
Okay. But you could you talk back and forth to each other?
I mean, they give their comments on how they'd like us to spend the money. Yes, so there is some dialogue, not a lot. They just comment on how they'd like to see us spend our money, and that's what it's about. Where do you want to see the spending? What are your priorities? Okay, so it's more like us listening.
So we addressed the issue of the Facebook public hearings further into the presentation, but Kath, can you give the counselors a sense at this point as to the difference in terms of the level of public participation via Facebook versus in person?
Well, we found that we have we've reached a lot more people. We have a lot more views from Facebook, a lot more people. And trust me, when I go out, everyone says I saw you on Facebook. So we do reach a lot more people as compared to the 20 or so that come to the meetings that we have done twice a year, that we're required to do too. So we have reached a lot more doing the Facebook hearings.
So just to bring that into context, on the bottom of this slide, we're saying in January 2022, people reached was 640 and there were 403 views. January 27th, there were 687 people reached versus 387 views versus roughly 20 people that were coming in person.
Thank you. Councilor Govan?
So from what I'm hearing, it looks like there were about 20 people in each meeting, and this was on Zoom, correct? Or virtually?
The 20 people that were at meetings were when we held meetings in person before COVID. Since COVID, we have done them on the Facebook Live hearings.
It is one of those issues in terms of public participation to meet people where they're at, versus saying, you might have family issues that are coming up and you can't necessarily be physically in a location. That's not to say that we should supplant, the actual physical meeting as we get it further into the recovery period for COVID. But I do think that we need to be expanding out from just, okay, we're having a public hearing on this specific night at this specific time, and everybody else that can't make it to that meeting ultimately gets left out.
Right. So that was kind of what my question was, Tim. So doing the meetings on Facebook Live, you said that increased the participation. How many people came to those meetings during those times on Facebook Live?
Yeah, right at the bottom of this slide that's up, it says that at the January 20th meeting, the number of people reached on Facebook was 640, and the number of people reached at the January 27th meeting was 687. So it's a significant increase in terms of people participating to the degree that they can via Facebook.
So that's what I was going to say. So you're saying that those 687 people gave input?
Those were people that were reached via Facebook to participate in the public hearing.
Okay, so I just want to know, like, how many people participated in the public hearing.
Okay,
like,
Counselor, one moment, okay?
I'm sorry.
Thank you. I'm just listening.
You know what I mean? So, because I know 687 people could be reached on Facebook, but did they all participate in the public hearing, or we don't know?
Are you asking how many people asked questions in the public hearing?
And gave their input, yeah.
Kath, do you have that?
We actually only had 2 or 3 comments on Facebook, but we received, and I don't know off the top of my head, the number of letters and emails that we're receiving, and we're still receiving because we're in the planning process.
Sure. So, and that was my next question. I'm sorry. I don't mean to take up too much time, Councilor Whitfield, but so from those responses, like, what has been the general consensus of what people want, or will you get to that later?
For this current year, I don't have anything in front of me. I know we received a letter from a gentleman, I don't know the name, who was interested in mental health funding for youth. We received a letter from the Historic Commission asking, or the Historic Society Trust asking for funding for historic properties. I don't have them all with me right now, but we're still receiving more, and we take those letters into consideration when we do our budgets. We also have to include all communication to HUD in our action plan, so they can also look at what residents are saying and how we responded.
Okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. So for the public participation of the current action plan, all information is posted on the city's website and the community development website. We advertise all our RFPs and meetings in English and Spanish in the Republican Neighborhood Plus and the legal notices, and we also advertise in La Voz. We have an extensive mail.
Okay, I wanted to stop you for a minute right here, and I'm sorry. We didn't plan on going through the whole presentation and then asking questions at the end. We're going to ask questions real time. I just wanted to put that out there. But how would folks know to look in the Republican Neighborhood Plus and legal notices section of the Republican, like, and why aren't we? Okay, so this advertising thing has been a big pet peeve of mine and other counselors for a while now. Like over a year, we've been talking about advertising. Who makes the decision on where advertisement falls?
We are required by federal regulations to advertise, put it out in the legal notices in the Republican. But
you're required federally to advertise specifically in the Republican?
In the Republican, in the legal notices section. Yes.
I think it's in the paper of records.
It's the primary paper of record.
Primary paper of record, but that doesn't have to be the only place we advertise, correct?
Certainly not.
Okay, so Lavas is good for the Latino community, but for the other Black community, I don't see any advertisement in any of our papers that we primarily go to, and that is the Point of View, who's been around for years, and now the Metro Record. So if you guys can just write that down, because I say this every single meeting, and if we could, I don't know what their advertising budget is, but it still seems like there's a gap in who we're communicating this with, because I can understand people that get the Republican having access, but a lot of folks don't get the Republican. They use Mass Live, so they don't have access to this information, whereas they may get the other media outlets and may have access to the information. So I'm gonna say this every time until we start seeing some changes in how we advertise, because I think it's inequitable the way that the advertisement is being done. And we do have to look at equity. I'm not familiar with La Base. It could be the Latino community largest paper. I'm not familiar with them. So I don't know why that's another chosen one, but if we're gonna select a Latino advertisement, I would like to see an African-American or Black advertisement as well.
We can certainly include the two publications that you've mentioned, Counselor.
Thank you. Counselor Govan?
I just want to reiterate that, Counselor Whitfield, I don't know how readily read La Voz is, but I know a lot of our community does go to like Mass Live. I'm really glad that you guys are on Facebook Live. I'm not sure if you guys can advertise on Facebook, because that's another place where a lot of people get their information, sadly. And certainly the African-American Point of View and the Metro is another good paper, because that really deals with equity. Totally agree. Thank you.
We also have a mailing to 175 organizations, businesses, and individuals that we send out to let them know about any public hearings, any RFPs that we have. We do a press release, and again, the public hearings.
Counselors, is it just to come back to this question about the advertising, is it your sense that the other than the minimum requirement by HUD, which is the legal notice in the paper of record, is it your sense that online is more effective than the paper publication?
It depends on who the viewer is. I don't want to say solely online, and it's just my opinion. Other counselors can speak up. I don't want to say solely online, but if you look at the generations, you probably get more younger folks reading the online media outlets over like getting a paper copy of the Republican. So I'm gonna say it could be a balance, because I don't, I know a lot of the older population still use the paper.
So mailing. Ideally it would be a mix of both?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you for that input.
So we're going to turn now to discussing the different programs and a little bit about what each one is. And I know you've also asked some questions about historically where the money has been spent. So first we're going to talk about the Home Investment Partnerships Program. This is a federal HUD program designed to create affordable housing for low and moderate income households. I'm showing you the current year budget. That is the year we're in, just to get you a sense of, these are the allowable activities and how we divide this up. So this money goes to first-time homebuyer assistance, development of rental housing, development of home ownership, and tenant-based rental assistance, and then some planning and administration money. And I'm going to talk more about what each of those areas are, the 4 areas. So this is just giving you historical, here were what the budgets were, how we divided up the total grant each year. As you can see, it is much the same from year to year. There's some slight variations dependent on, especially with development, what we have going on and what is able to be built in a given year. But we're, you know, over many years, these are what our priorities are and continue to be. So first I want to mention the first-time home buyer program. We provide, it's run through the Office of Housing. The amounts have changed, but currently we're providing up to $4,000 per household who is income eligible, which is up to 80% area median income and buying a house in the city. The funds can go toward closing costs and down payment assistance. Over the 7 years we're reporting on here, since FY15, we've assisted 677 households. Pretty much every neighborhood of Springfield, except Metro Center. And this is, you know, the total work in that program over that 7-year period.
I wanted to draw the councilor's attention to this. This was what I was referencing at the outset in terms of a little bit of the confusion around home. Most of the councilors, I think, are well aware of the first-time home buyer program that the city runs. And you know, that's a very popular program, and might not have really recognized that that program was being funded by the home entitlement.
Councilors have any comments on that screen before we move on? Councilor Hurst? Oh, I just wanted to also recognize Councilor Allen is on my phone with me because he couldn't get into the meeting. So Councilor Allen is here.
Thank you. Thank Councilor Whitfield.
You're welcome.
Just a quick question. Have we, thank you, Madam Chair. Have we been expending all of the money for the home buyer program on a yearly basis? And if not, where does that money go?
We have been expending the money each year. This year is a little harder because HUD has a cap on the amount a home can cost, and we are, they did not, they're behind, I would say, in increasing the cap. So I am a little worried that whether this might be the first year we don't expend all the money, and if we didn't, we would roll it over into next year.
Thank you.
Councilor Govan. Councilor Govan.
Yes, thank you so much. Tim, so you said the first time home, is that like for the first time classes? And then it helps people with their down payments? Is that what I'm understanding?
No, Jerry, can you explain the
yes,
details
so
of
this
the program?
Actually money that goes toward the purchase of the house.
I see.
Although it covers down pay, I mean, it covers closing costs or down payment assistance, or down payment rather. There is a requirement, these are federal funds, there's a bunch of requirements with them, one of which is people have to take a first-time homebuyer class. They can take that anywhere, but people can come here first, learn about the program, we'll connect them with a homebuyer education program. We don't run any of those internally. And then when they're ready to buy the house, we're working with them to get to closing and to issue a check to assist them at closing of the house.
Well, that's really good to know. Thank you so much.
Hold on, guys. Councilor Hurst.
Sorry, is the advertising the same for these first-time home buyers? I mean, are we going through the same venues?
So the first-time homebuyer program is sort of an ongoing, has been ongoing for many years. I would say that the primary ways that we get word out about it is through programs that do first-time homebuyer classes. That's a key way. We have a lot of relationships with lenders, so banks, and the other people we know are realtors. And so we've sort of gotten the word out to anyone who would be having an interaction with a home buyer so that they can be saying, oh, you know, the city has money to put toward this.
So who are can you provide us with a list at some point in time of those individuals who the city is contracting with to offer a class? Do we pay those individuals at all, or do they do it sort of on the house, hoping that, do you go through like realtors and they hope that they might?
The first-time homebuyer class program is funded by HUD directly. We don't fund anyone that does it. Wayfinders does it. Springfield Neighborhood Housing Services does it. To be HUD certified. And there's a HUD certification process. So it's usually, it is agencies that are doing some other HUD work usually. We don't recruit, we're not doing the outreach to find those or to fund those programs. They exist otherwise.
Got it. Okay.
Thank you.
Move on. So the next big piece of the home program is development of affordable housing. There are two chunks of work we do here. The first is developing multifamily, usually rental, affordable housing. These are, the city uses its home funds as a, as a match to State Department of Housing and Community Development funds and the low-income housing tax credit programs. Usually, multifamily residential development is very expensive. We are putting less than $500,000 into it a year. So our project, our money doesn't go very far. So we're working with those larger programs that put the bulk of the money into these programs, into these projects. We coordinate very closely with DHCD. DHCD will not fund a large project in Springfield unless Springfield also puts money into the project. It is their way of getting a match and showing local commitment. So our multifamily housing funds are directed toward that. The way that, and when I say, so there are projects that are low-income housing tax credits, typically those projects need to have a somewhat large scale to make sense because the paperwork, the legal work, the way that those projects happen is expensive. And if you're not doing a lot of units, it's going to be too expensive per unit. So typically those projects are at least 40 units at a time. The way that people seek money from the state is through the what's called the one-stop application. The state, it's called that because you're in one application applying to multiple programs. So we also use the one-stop application for developers to apply to the cities, to the Office of Housing. So they submit to us the same application that they're submitting to the state. Next, I'm going to mention home ownership, but then the next slide has a list of what those projects are. Yes.
Sorry. Before you move on, so this is what you traditionally have funded with this rental housing bucket of money, but is it the only thing that you can fund with this bucket of money? Like,
well, no, I mean, we could not fund this at all. We could put all our money into something else, but if we did that, we wouldn't draw in the state DHCD and low income housing tax credit funds.
The city wouldn't have.
Here's my conundrum. Here's my conundrum, Tim. Let me finish with it. There's only a few, one that I know of, or two, maybe with Home City Development, that goes after low income housing tax credit from the state. Because I went to the state, and I'm actually having a presentation with the state on these credits, because it's a very cumbersome process. And so, I mean, if we are solely going to fund that particular project, then the same developers are always going to get this particular funding. And so that's why I asked, is it the only way that it could be used, or can we restructure this funding to do this in addition to something else? I know it's not a whole lot, but what you're giving to a couple of organizations can help some of these new, younger, maybe developers that have less capital than some of these organizations that's been around for 20 years.
So, Counselor, I would suggest—
Please answer that, Jerry.
Sorry?
I'll answer that question.
Okay.
So the bottom line, Counselor, is we're showing you a number of programs that are under the home entitlement. As Jerry indicated, we don't have to do any support for rental housing if the city didn't want to do support for rental housing. The only cautionary note that's associated with that is that we wouldn't have any new low-income housing tax credit development occurring in the city if the city ultimately doesn't provide a match back to DHCD. The requirement that Jerry's talking about municipal participation associated with the low-income housing tax credit is pretty much a standing policy for DHCD to evidence that there's municipal support for the program or for the development that's being advanced. And ultimately, that's the city's decision if it wants to support the creation of new low-income housing tax credit development within the city. And as we indicated, this is a small component of the home funding that's assigned to this.
No, I understand, and I appreciate your comment, and I appreciate what's been done in the past with the low income housing tax credit. However, there are other opportunities to obtain rental housing in the city of Springfield, so it doesn't necessarily have to be this particular program. And there's other pockets of money within the city of Springfield that can give a match to low income housing tax credit programs as well. What I'm saying is that while this is a small pot of money in this program, we can be creative on how we use it. It doesn't always have to be used for the low income housing tax credit. And I do understand that there is a match, because I went to the website and I looked it up and it did say that it requires a match from the municipality. So I do understand that, but I'm saying it doesn't have to be the only way that we use it. Since we historically been using it and only a couple of developers can get this, it's still not an equitable process. There's not an equitable process on the state level. There's not an equitable process on the municipal level. And so the same players keep getting the funding, and then there's other opportunities that we could be helping that we're not, because we won't change our structure. So that's why I asked the question, is that the only way that it could be used? I'm not saying it's a bad way or anything like that. I'm just asking.
It certainly is, as we've indicated, the rental housing component of home doesn't have to be part of the investment strategy if the city doesn't want it to be. It can certainly be something else.
No, I just was asking, could it be used for in other ways? That's it. Councilor Hurst? Oh, Councilor? Okay, Councilor Hurst. Sorry, Councilor Govan, I seen you put it down and put it back up, so you can go next.
Tim, can you just, Jerry, can you guys just give us a breakdown as to who has received those funds over the course of, say, the last 5 years? It seems like they're not.
So the next,
we do have that coming up.
Next slide.
You have that coming up.
I think it would be helpful if I went a couple more slides, because I think there's some more information that would be helpful for you to see here. And then return to this conversation.
Okay, I'm gonna just let Councilor Govan ask her question, because she has to leave shortly, and then we could we'll try to run through more than one slide at a time, Jerry. Sorry about that.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you so much, Chairwoman Whitfield. So the same, kind of like on the same line of questioning, but I think that this is a great way to use this money. Again, like where would you say if it's an RFP or if it's an advertisement, for less of a lack of a better word, where do we tell people that this is an opportunity for developers in our city? So, you know, we have a few developers in our city who are, you know, living in the city and want to develop more affordable housing in the city, but they don't have access to this information. So where is this information found, or where can they find that information? And can we target them somehow? That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
I think it would be helpful for me to go ahead to this slide.
Okay, go ahead. I'm going to sign out and then sign back in. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, I'm going to miss.
So where I'm going with this, so these are the projects we have done since over the 7-year time period we've talked about. And I think one of the things I want you to see is the scale of these projects. So the last line here, TDC is total development cost. These are projects that are 22 million, 27 million, 75 million, 135 million. These are very large projects because that is cost is to do large scale rehabilitation or production. Our home funds, we spend about $400,000 a year or so in home funds. So one of the things one of the realities of housing development is 400,000 a year doesn't buy us really anything unless we're buying, you know, a 2-family home. So here we're putting in 400,000 on the top project. 41 units are produced. Most of the money comes from outside of Springfield. So I think one of the things to know about these projects is so first there are Home City Development is local. Flores Development is local. Valley Real Estate at the bottom is local. Also here is Better Homes. Better Homes is another part, is connected to Home City Development. We have had local developers. However, I think what's important to know here is these are developers with significant experience and assets. And I think the point is so well taken about how do we grow more of those here, but at the same time, it is recognizing that these are not projects that are starter projects. So I think I think of it as there's a pipeline. We fund people to build houses. We fund people to rehab houses. Those are smaller development projects that can help someone get started in development field. Most people who do this kind of development, their experience generally comes from working from a larger developer. I think the complexity of these projects is very high, and I think that because they have tax credit investment, which is private investors, the level of scrutiny is extraordinarily high, and no one wants to invest in someone who doesn't already have significant experience here. So it is a really hard area to break into. I will say Home City Development, one of the things that's really nice is they have, that's Tom Kagelman. He is specifically looking for people who live in the city to work for him so he can train them up in how to do this development. But I would say, we just recently had a conversation with some folks from Wayfinders where they were saying it took their agency about 10 years to build the capacity to be able to do this type of development. So I want to work with you absolutely on figuring out how we get more of this locally, but it's not as simple, we put out an RFP and someone responds, because they're not also going to get the state money if that's where the project is starting.
Hey, Jerry, it might be helpful to also explain what 400,000 gets you in terms of actual units, if that's the only sole funding source. So like in comparison with Healthy Homes, how many units we could create in rehab housing you understand like the difference?
You can go ahead.
Sure.
I'm not sure.
No. Okay, let me say this. So my research with the tax credits, so they get a tax credit of about $500,000 per unit that they put out for low income housing. And then the additional amount of money they do have to go out to investors to get. So if we said, okay, Brookings School got 42 units times, and all of them were low income housing, they would get 42 times 500,000 or up to 500,000 in tax credits to help them develop this property. And so it's not like they're still spending their money. And that's why I said there's a gap on the municipal side in equity, and there's a gap on the state side in equity. And I'm talking to the legislators about it, because we have to start looking at things through an equitable lens on the municipal side and the state side. But through my research and my understanding, they get, for the units that they deem low income, they get up to 500,000 per unit to help build this property. So it's not like, I understand that you guys saying that we're not touching the surface, but we're not also not telling the whole story behind how they get this funding. It is a volatile market to be in. And so that's why I'm like, why would we invest? I mean, I understand that the units are important. Like, look at 346 units and think in colonial states with 500 units, very important. But we still have to like look at things through an equitable lens. That's all I'm saying. Because like I said, I'm going to get more in-depth training on this tax credit, because if we don't do it, I'm asking First Resource to be a member, because from his wife, from Ellen, she said that how Gordon got his start is he worked for a company that was involved with the low income tax credits. And so he got mentored to the place that he's in. So why can't we have mentorship from folks, especially if they don't live locally? And so I applaud Tom Kegelman and Home City Development for at least trying to train folks to learn this process. Councilor Govan and then Councilor Hurst.
Hi, I'm sorry, I'm in the car. Is there any way that we could get this PowerPoint, because I'm not able to really see the whole thing. I'm driving, and I'd like to also do what Councilor Whitfield said and kind of like really study it, because agreeably, equity obviously is not happening at the state level or at the city level. And we need to figure out a way where we can make that happen. So I really like that idea about the mentoring and helping people learn the process, because a lot of people don't know the process. So I'm really happy that we're doing that. And is there any way we could get a copy of the PowerPoint?
Councilor,
that was my question.
We'll share the PowerPoint with the entire council.
That was
Thank you so much.
Because we know there's a lot of detail in here.
Thank you. Councilor Hurst.
Thank you. How do we decide how much they get from the program? Is there a formula for that in terms of home funds?
Yeah, it's generally a conversation with DHCD. DHCD there was a back and forth.
Who's that? DHCD again? I'm sorry.
The Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development, who is the main funder of these projects. So they put the deal together with the developer. They're the primary funder, and they have a back and forth with us. We're typically we make some low offer, and they say that's not enough. There is a gap, and we want more. And they keep pushing us on every project. They push us to the highest amount they can get us to, essentially. And we don't have a lot of home money. We have a lot of need in the city. We would like to preserve our home money to the greatest extent possible to do more work in the city. But so yes, it's a negotiation.
Got it. And are we able to put any stipulations on these developers, or are we hand-tied by federal and state regulations?
This is a very highly regulated area. I'm not sure what kind of regulate or stipulations we're looking for.
So by stipulations, typically, or not typically, sometimes when the city gives out money, I know for like the TIFs and the HDIPs, we require developers in the past to you know, make sure that they're hiring a certain percentage of women and minorities and Springfield residents, et cetera. And so we were able to do that because they were receiving city money. It seems to me like they're still receiving city money. And so I guess my question is, you know, are there any stipulations that that could be put in place that are not in place now, similar to the TIF requirements and the HTIF requirements?
As recipients of federal funding of these amounts, they are required to comply with Section 3, which is the federal law regarding local and minority hiring and women-owned businesses. So there are federal goals that we are pressing them to meet and then reporting on each year as part of our reports to HUD.
Okay, but nothing from this.
They're generally meeting, these developers are generally meeting those goals.
They're generally meeting those goals. Okay. And First Resources clearly it makes up 50% of these developments. And so I guess, you know, it seems like we ought to, you know, we probably could have a further conversation with First Resource in terms of what it is that they might be able to give back above and beyond what it is that they're doing now, because I would imagine that they're not doing this if they don't stand to make a significant amount of money off of these developments. And so, you know, even if it's not in writing, you know, there might be some other opportunities for the city to leverage this funding that clearly these developers know is available and that the likelihood is high that they're going to be able to take advantage of. So for a further discussion.
Thank you, Councilor. And before we move forward, I see that we already have First Resource in the start of 2022, and I didn't see that the RFP for 2022 already came out on the state side. And I thought that they got some of this rental housing funds for the building that they just got the special permit for on State Street, and I don't see that on the list.
So Knox Residence 1 and 2 was approved by HUD, by DHCD last year. It is, construction will start in 2022, but they have been funded they were in a prior funding round at the state. So they're fully funded now. The projects that First Resource has come before the council on have not been funded by DHCD, and so do not have a funding commitment from the city at this point. So first they have to put the project together, then they apply to DHCD, and at the time they're applying to DHCD is when they're talking to the city about funding. I think the other thing to just say here too is that these are not grants, these are loans. They are really for the purpose of ensuring that the property remains affordable. So they come with an affordable housing restriction.
Okay, thank you.
The other point I'd like to make, though, is at the state level, the low-income housing tax credit program is highly, highly, highly competitive, and they reject more applications than they fund. And for many projects, it's taken multiple efforts to get to funding at the state level. And the other component piece that I think is important to understand is that it is a significant source when you look at the pool of affordable housing within the city and what is being either rehabbed or created as new. The level of our investment versus the scale of units that we're getting is very, very significant. So I'll just leave it with that.
Okay, so the next piece I'm going to speak to is development of home ownership if we're ready to move on. Let me actually go back to,
sure.
It was on this slide. So it is just, so what the city does here is we put out money to produce infill homes that will be for sale to income qualified buyers. There is a set aside in the home funds. It's on hold during COVID, but 15% of our grant, of our full grant, needs to go to community housing development organizations called CHODOs, which are a specific kind of nonprofit. And those CHODOs have to get 15% of the funds. So that is our first go-to around development of infill homes. But we do put out publicly advertised requests for proposals when we do those projects. So I just wanted to then go to
Jerry, can you just review the CHODOs that are in Springfield?
Okay, all right.
So at this moment, I think Habitat for Humanity is the only certified CHODO. North End Housing Initiative had been a CHODO. I don't think it is at this moment. So that is actually a huge challenge for us. And it has to do with actually, and I'll say the reason North End Housing Initiative doesn't meet that right now is they need to have a full-time staff person or they need to have a staff person who does development. And they do not have that, so they don't qualify.
So did they qualify in 2021?
No,
I think North End Housing Initiative is
in 2021, they did not qualify, and we put it out to, we did not put it out to CHODOs because we didn't have that restriction from HUD because it was on hold during COVID. The earlier projects were required to be done by CHODOs.
Okay, all right.
So these are, and this is, you know, that is a smallish percent of our money. We are doing, you know, a house or two a year. And yeah, so these are the projects that have been done.
So my question here is, year over year, North End Housing Initiative and Habitat for Humanity knew what, you know, how to get these funding sources. And I know it's small amounts to you and things like that, but 173,000 of funding can really help other developers. And I know that North End Housing Initiative is an offshoot for New North Citizens Council, because I looked it up. And so I'm not opposed to anything that they do, but it's two organizations here. And so why isn't there more organizations that know about this is probably my biggest concern.
So they need to be a nonprofit organization that does housing development.
And there's other ones, right? Because there's Springfield Housing Authority. I mean, there's other programs out here that does housing. I don't know.
Well, we talk regularly with Springfield Housing Authority, who is not interested in doing this kind of development, because we talk to them actually as part of our consolidated and annual planning process. We ask what their needs are and what their wants are about housing. It is actually a concern of mine that we don't have a lot of capacity, nonprofit capacity around around housing development. And in the context of home requiring at it be this CHODO structure, it has to be a nonprofit. So there's actually room here for development of additional agencies. There's not, when we were last in the world where we could only fund CHODOs, we were calling places and encouraging them to become CHODOs and saying, please, you know, we have money to give out. So it is more that, right, there's not a lot of folks doing it. We're trying to encourage more of it to happen.
Thank you. I just want to encourage Tim and your department to make these developments known more to the community, more outreach. Jerry, I don't doubt that you're reaching out. I think you do awesome work, but maybe folks will start developing 501c3, especially developers, if they know programs like this exist and they want to help the community. Zeta, Councilor Govan?
Thank you very much. That's exactly what I was going to ask about. How complicated, how difficult it is to create a CHODO if you have a 501c3 and you're interested in doing this. And does it have to be someone that is going to build the houses? Because that's what it sounds like Habitat for Humanity is. I think the North End Housing Initiative. How complicated it is. And could you, I would like to see the information, see what those criteria are, so that we could see if we could go out into the community and create some of these then, if there's,
Sure.
Since there is such a need.
Yes, I'm happy to share those criteria. Much of it has to do with the composition of the board, which requires a percentage of low-income people and people, and particularly from the community where the development will be happening. And there's some other factors, but after this meeting, as we send along the slides, I'll be happy to also send along we have a description of the CHODO and what's required HUD has to certify it. So what would be required by HUD to certify it? We have this sort of application. So yes, happy to share that.
Okay.
So
that's great.
Jerry, but I do want to say, and I had sort of talked about this at the last subcommittee meeting that I think you were at, Councilor Whitfield, on Monday. We also have disaster recovery funds that go into this sort of development, and there are home funds that don't have to go to CHODOs. And we have done extensive outreach also to try and get more developers, both for-profit and nonprofit, to participate in this program. Myself and the Deputy Director of Housing have done technical assistance workshops. We send out email blasts, and we're happy to add folks to those email blasts. When those RFPs go out, we advertise them, again, extensively through the email blasts, through the tax title mailing list, through our contractor lists. And we also now have a Facebook page for our division where we're advertising that sort of stuff regularly too. So certainly we are constantly trying to attract developers to do this kind of work and give them the technical assistance they would need to do this. I think I spoke to last time how we did a technical assistance workshop last time we had an RFP like this out, and we had probably about 50 or so developer sort type show up and only actually received 2 proposals. But we have a new developer this time around that we are doing extensive handholding to try to get them through the process, and are willing to try and get developers to where they need to be to do this sort of development. And if there are folks that you think are interested, I would say definitely give them my contact information so we can get them on our email blast list. So when those things go out, they can be contacted.
Councilor,
okay,
I know you still have something else, but please put us on the contact list.
Yeah, so we do also include the council on our tax title.
Oh yes, you do, you do. Yes. But I don't remember getting an email about a CHODO or this type of program. So like any program that comes from your guys' office, we should get it, because we have reached to folks that may not be on the list, don't know how to get on the list, that we could share information with. So if you guys could please just include us in some of these initiatives, then we could probably help you get more people involved.
Sure, of course.
And any names you want to send to us, Tracy, I'll add to our mailing list now. We, like I said, we have about 175 on it, but anyone wants me to add to the list, please, by all means, send me the name of the organization, the person, the business, and the address.
And the other thing I do want to say is we are currently in the process of putting together an extensive outreach list around organizations, nonprofit organizations that do various types of work. So, once we have a draft of that, we're sort of happy to circulate that and have you folks give us other suggestions if you think there are folks that we're missing.
Okay, after Councilor Govan's questions, we're gonna move through the PowerPoints because I don't want to keep people on here for another hour and a half. And then we'll ask a few questions at the end. We'll wrap up. If we need to have another subcommittee meeting, we can schedule it in the future, but I know that we all have families and responsibilities. So Councilor Govan, and then we're gonna just go through the PowerPoints.
Okay, thank you so much. So I just wanted to make a point that Springfield has a Springfield Community Land Trust, which sole purpose is to create affordable housing. And we didn't know anything about this because I was the president of it a few years ago, and it's still around. So this is some information that, you know, we could have really used to help us, you know, because we could have worked with some developers. We have 501c3, and we were desperate to find something, you know, to create affordable housing, and to come to find this out. This is exciting. So I'm just going to contact my land trust people and see if we could do some work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Counselor.
Okay, go on.
Keep going and keep going and keep going.
Okay, so the next area of what we use home funds for is tenant-based rental assistance. These are like local housing vouchers, I guess I would call them. We have used them specifically around chronically homeless people. We pair our rental assistance with intensive supportive services. So we're serving often people who are mentally ill or have substance use disorders, or often both, and providing them intensive, mostly people who were literally on the street, and we're getting them into housing and supporting them. That serves about 45 people annually. And that is home. The next one we're going to turn to is community development block grant. Sorry, whoops.
So the community development block grant, we have an annual funding. It's been about $3 million every year. It's 3.9 in the current year. We spend a certain amount on planning and administrative salaries. We spend money on public service agencies to run public service. That is capped at 15%. There's funding in economic development, housing, public infrastructure, which is funding parks and DPW, neighborhoods, and community facilities. And
but for the infrastructure, is that the amount that has to go in there?
No.
Okay.
No. There isn't any set amount that has to go in anywhere in community development.
Okay.
You could spend the funds the way we choose to spend them, but those are requests from DPW and Park. Okay. So the next slide shows you how we've allocated funds over the past 7 years in different categories. The next is, just for your information, it is the eligible target neighborhoods, the eligible neighborhoods for us to spend funding in per HUD. The city expended in FY21, 98% of the money they expended was in the target areas, and 97% was to benefit low-mod people. The people that are outside of the target areas are the emergency repair people, the program we run, and that is based on income and not where you live. So they were able to be funded based on their income. But 98% of our money is spent in the target areas, and 97% is spent on low moderate income population. These are a list of organizations that have applied for and have received funding through the city for public service activities between FY15 and 22. Okay, for economic development, the city has current year is funding $30,000 to grant to Interrise to operate the Rise of Springfield, $200,000 to business support program, and $50,000 for the public art murals and public sculptures. The housing part is $100,000. That is program delivery and homebuyer assistance funded. Those are staff salaries and overhead costs that go into the homebuyer program that's funded out of home. The emergency repair program, that's $425,000. That includes the program and staff costs to run that program. Heating system repair and replacements is the HeartWAP. This is for the staffing for the LHEAT program that is run, that people applied for and received, who qualify for the heating, what is it
Heating
called?
System repair and
Heating system repair that are on fuel assistance. I'm sorry, that was what I was looking for. Through the New England Farm Workers. And then the housing rehab, we have a contract with Revitalize CDC to do home repairs every year.
So this funding right here would have been general fund expenditures if we didn't use the CDBG money, correct?
Yeah, these are a lot of the staff salaries. A lot of the grants, like the home grant only gives us about $167,000 for admin, and it clearly doesn't cover the staff. ESG only gives us in the 20,000s for admin. It's very little. So we are allowed to charge admin salaries as well as what we call program delivery, which is part of staff time, to the CDBG grant in order to run the programs. Unfortunately or unfortunately, a lot of these programs are very intense hand-holding to help people through these application processes, et cetera. So it's a lot of staff hours. These are the sidewalks and the park restoration programs. These are the parks that we've done over the last 7 years.
It didn't move. Did it move for you guys, the screen? Oh, okay.
Structure. It should be public infrastructure now. So
okay, yep, I see it now.
Okay. So it's sidewalks, bikeways, neighborhood designs. DPW puts in a request, and we spend most of that money on sidewalks. And then these are the parks we've done over the past 7 years. The park department will put in a request and uses our money as a match for a lot of the state grants, so that we are the match that enables them to apply to get a bigger pot of money. We'll match a grant $250,000, and they'll get $1 million from the state. So Pat Sullivan every year puts in to request money in order to match their big projects. In the neighborhoods, we do historic preservation. We rehab historic homes, the neighborhood capacity building. We fund the neighborhood councils for just their overhead costs, and we have a staff person who oversees.
Is this supposed to change again? I see public infrastructure still. Okay. Thank you.
So I don't know why there's a delay.
I don't know.
And you're not seeing it for a minute later.
I'll talk slower.
Sorry.
We have disposition of city-owned properties. We have a staff person who works with the city-owned properties, the tax title properties, clearance and demolition. We have a staff person who helps as far as with trying to clear lot cleaning and demolition, and helps oversee that program. We of course have a person who does graffiti removal, mud cast, and we also run proactive code enforcement sweeps. There's called the Saturday sweeps, and there's code enforcement goes overtime. Staff goes out on Saturdays and goes through neighborhoods proactive, not answering calls to see if there's anything going on the weekends that are within the code laws. We also do rehab for buildings for nonprofits. It's a very popular program. These are the organizations we funded from FY15 to 22. For small rehab projects, it's up to $25,000 on their buildings. For nonprofits that own their building and are in need of repairs or upgrades and service low-income people in Springfield.
Tim, I think this is you.
Yes. Councilors, the council recently accepted HUD's approval of the Section 108 loan guarantee. That was for $5 million. It's for city assistance in repositioning vacant and underperforming properties that are located in the Main Street Convention Center master plan geography. That is the geographic boundary. Any acquisition or utilization of that fund ultimately requires council approval. There would be a subcommittee review as well as a public comment period associated with it. This is just basically the public process that was gone through with regards to advancing that application to HUD and the acceptance of it.
There are two more entitlement grants. They're smaller. I'm going to briefly mention them. Emergency Solutions Grant is designed to assist individuals and families quickly regain stability in permanent housing after experiencing a housing crisis or homelessness. This year, we're getting $333,000, $698. The things we use this for are homelessness prevention, emergency shelter, and rapid rehousing. This is showing the breakdown by those uses for each of the last 7 years. We select these by doing, we do a public RFP. It is actually out right now for next year. These are the agencies that have funding for this current year and the work they are doing, the work they are funded to do with the money for this year. So Catholic Charities, Friends of the Homeless, Mental Health Association, YWCA. And over the last several years, the same agencies have applied each year. A while ago, when Wayfinders, back when it was HAP, used to get this money. They said actually the grants were so small that it didn't make sense in the terms of what they did with it. It was homelessness prevention, and they get so much money from the state that it was hard for them to keep track of a separate eligibility that's required under the federal laws. Gandara had this as a gap filler in one of their projects that had lost funding one year. It is open to, you know, we advertise this broadly. It is, many of these places have staff, so they are reapplying each year to cover staff costs, and we don't get a lot of new applications from year to year. The next other smallish one is housing opportunities for persons with AIDS, which is, as the name mentions, it's for the housing needs of people living with HIV and AIDS. This grant, this grant has increased rapidly over the last few years because HUD has changed its reallocation process. And so we're getting about $727,000 a year. It is spent on homelessness prevention, rapid rehousing, tenant-based rental assistance, so that's rental subsidies, and support services. This grant is for Hamden, Hampshire, and Franklin counties. We are an entitlement funded area for this larger geographic area. The agencies that are funded this year is A Positive Place, which is out of Cooley Dickinson and serves Franklin, Hampshire, and the northern part of Hamden County, and then New North Citizens Council and River Valley Counseling Center, both of those based in, well, New North, you know, River Valley is based in both Springfield and Holyoke. Here it is showing the grants that they get each year. There used to be, CHD also had something called the HIV/AIDS Law Consortium. They stopped that program, and at the time they stopped that program, River Valley hired an attorney to be doing that work, and that is making sure that there's legal assistance available to people with HIV and AIDS related to their housing needs. We want to mention other HUD grants that come through this division. Disaster recovery. We mentioned earlier. Oh, Tina, why not? So let me turn it over to Tina. Sorry, I was just...
Okay. You know, the council has reviewed this and the next grant fairly extensively before they were approved and post-approval, but I'll just do a quick overview so I'm not keeping everyone too long. Under housing, we do homeownership development, which is really that single family new construction that we've talked about. We do have more projects coming up. We are looking for developers to do that. The council will certainly receive notification when that goes out. We do intend to do a technical assistance workshop on that for developers. And we do have a couple of projects breaking ground this spring that we are closing on the sale of now. So we're excited for that. I should say, you know, this is funding that is really concentrated in the area where the tornado hit. So we're fairly limited geographically around where we can do projects. Removal of blight, which was for demolition projects. All of these funds have been expended to date.
Can I ask you a question about removal of blight? Do you have a list of blighted properties?
So, no, I don't have a list of blighted properties. The building department cites properties for blight. The one list that I have, which is properties that are slated for demolition. That means properties that are funded for demolition currently. And there are 2 properties on that list currently.
Okay, because I remember working in finance, there was a list of blighted properties, and now I'm just having.
So I will say there was years ago, we found that it was incredibly hard to actually maintain out of this office, and it isn't maintained out of this office any longer. Like I said, the building department does site properties for Blight, and they may have a list over there, but I can't.
Okay. I'll check there. Thank you.
Sure. Housing repair, this was a program for homeownership, for homeowners to do housing repair, again, within the area that was impacted by the tornado. These were properties that had direct unresolved impact from the tornado that didn't get private insurance or FEMA funds to fix that. This program, we've expended all the funding in that program and have sort of reached the capacity of folks that we think had that direct tornado impact. And so that funding's been reallocated to other programs in here. Historic preservation, this was a fairly limited pot of money, again, just to do small historic preservation projects within the Six Corners historic districts. All of that funding has been allocated, but some of the construction of those projects will start this spring. Economic development, we've done some workforce training. That funding at this point has been expended. I think actually all of the funding at this point in economic development has been expended. Same with infrastructure, and obviously administration and planning is really just our salaries and various administrative costs associated with that. NDR, again, before this application was submitted, we did consult and present the plan to the council, which they approved and had input on. And then once the funding was awarded, we re-reviewed where this funding was going with the council. I know that we have some new folks, so I'll just quickly go over it. $5 million went to
me and Justin are the only ones, and Tim, we know it. You don't got to go over it.
All right, cool, perfect.
He knows.
We're the only ones on. I mean.
So I do just want to touch on the Healthy Homes program, which is another area where I know that there's been some interest around how the city attracts contractors. We are also regularly seeking contractors to assist us with this program. We are getting close to running out of money here. We are hoping to allocate more funding here, but we do assist, the property owners with that bidding and do maintain a contractor list around this as well, and do sort of advertise for contractors. And, if counselors know anyone that you think should be on that list, by all means, send them our way.
And I like the fact that you guys are considering getting the plans and giving the plans and all that stuff. I think that will help with the application process. So that's around
the new construction. We are hoping that will help. And we did actually get, I was nervous that we weren't getting responses from designers, but we did get some responses this morning. So that's good.
The next one is another competitive grant, $2.3 million. We're currently running a lead-based paint hazard reduction program. We'll be coming up for renewal. We'll be seeking more funds. This is de-letting homes where there is a child under 6 or a pregnant woman. This is another place where we do a lot of outreach to contractors to get them interested in the program. We have provided training for people to get lead certified so that people who are doing regular construction have the certifications that they need to do this particular kind of work. And we bid each of these projects, sending out notice for every project, walk through to our extensive list of contractors. The Hambden County Continuum of Care is a little over $5 million a year. The city is the applicant, but it is for covering Hambden County, and there is a separate application process. And there is a board of directors that comes from throughout Hambden County that oversees this money. Here's a list of the agencies that are funded. They are specifically providing housing or rapid rehousing to people who are coming out of homelessness. We wanted to talk a little bit about procurement and contracting. We have mentioned along the way RFPs. So we are usually using RFPs. There's different things we've talked about throughout about certain programs are funded in other ways, but where there is money available to folks in the community, it's generally through an RFP. I think we've already mentioned where we've done that. In every RFP, we make sure that there is some way to do question and answers. Either we have a bidders conference or we have a way to submit questions and get answers that are provided to everyone who is interested in applying. We do technical assistance sessions for some of them. It really depends on what kind of project it is. And we have committees that score them. The committees are often a combination of city staff and people in neighborhoods, especially neighborhoods impacted by a particular project. I think Tina really just mentioned this. This is a lot about our contracting and finding contractors to do work in both the Healthy Homes program and the lead-based hazard removal program. So I'm not sure that we need to say anything else here. Just we've done a lot of, an extensive amount of outreach. We wanted to just end by mentioning that these programs are all intensely overseen by HUD. So returning back to where we started, this is an every 5-year planning process, that is our really extensive planning process. And then the 5 years we're doing the work for those 5 years. So, but we have a plan that is submitted to HUD and approved. So that plan is approved by HUD. The public participation plan is approved by HUD. Neighborhood revitalization strategy plan. And then annually, each action plan and each CAPER, which is the report on action plan, is like our budget for the year. And CAPER is like our report on how we spent the money the prior year. Those all go to HUD. And as I mentioned, so everything here has to be approved by HUD before we can move on and do the next thing.
Who's normally on this committee?
I'm sorry?
This committee that puts the 5-year plan together, who's usually on it?
The departments put it together, our departments, economic development, housing, and community development. We all work together on the plan, and we hold different roundtables and different meetings to get participation for over a 3-month period. That's a huge process.
Okay, because I just want to know if there's like diversity on the committee.
So there's not a committee. This has been staff work. But there is extensive public participation. So there is work in the neighborhoods and with the community to help define what our plan should be. I mean,
so I would just love it if we could get those meeting notices and things like that, because outside of the CDBG notices of participation, I don't know of any other, I don't get any other notices. I can't tell you, even just being a resident in the city of Springfield, that I knew about these meetings that are happening. And so it would be helpful if we get them and we could share them with the community.
I'm in complete agreement with that, Counselor. I think anytime that we're out seeking public participation, we should be informing the entire council that we're out looking to seek public participation so that you guys can help assist us in getting more people to the participation.
Yeah, even us, like I would like to participate. I want to know what people are talking about and what they want and what they want to see, like to help better the city of Springfield. And
that better informs your vote when the plan comes before you for approval to send to HUD.
Right. Say we part of the process. That will definitely help us like understand and not have to do this all the time, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
So I just reiterate, in terms of public participation and outreach, I am of the opinion that there's always room for improvement on that. We're open to taking any suggestions that you might have and working with the council to ensure that as many people in the community are involved in the process as possible.
And I just wanted to ask Ms. I don't want to mess up your name.
Xiomara. So here, I'm going to put it phonetically.
Okay, Xiomara, if you want to say anything. Oh, Xiomara. Okay, got it. Xiomara.
This was really informative, and I think it's great to see just like where the pathways of funds have gone throughout the city. From the EDC's perspective, you know, we are doing a lot of work with a lot of our big corporate organizations, those large economic engines, and having really candid discussions on how we can really dive into inclusive work, you know, and like really changing up some of the systems that perhaps cause barriers and that do cause barriers so that we can, you know, really diversify whatever pipeline that is, whether it's hiring, suppliers, et cetera. And quite frankly, one of the things that I've noticed in the past 6 months, it's just there's a gap in communication, and that's in general. There's a lot of gaps of communication, and in order for us to really build a lot of this trust and buy-in from our constituents and from our residents, we have to develop like this environment of inclusion and folks feeling a sense of belonging, and even folks in their region feeling like there's some affinity to their region. And all of us, and whether it's in the private sector, within our municipalities, our elected officials, allowing space, you know, for our residents to really provide input and feel connected to the growth of their region. So I think there's a lot of great work that I've seen happening, and there's just so much opportunity to just re-engage and re-energize a lot of our residents, and just, you know, gain a lot of buy-in and support, which ultimately will lead to even more positive outcomes. So I think this is good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming, Xiomara. Thank you. I appreciate it. Councilor Alan Hurst, did you have any final comments before we let everyone go and live life?
No, I think this was very informative, and you know, I echo a lot of what is it Xiomara said. Xiomara.
Yes.
Okay. You know, I think we got to be purposeful, and you know, I think we have to be purposeful in terms of what it is that we do. If we want other individuals who are not normally at the table to have a seat at the table, and that should be all of our mission. And you know, making sure folks are informed is part of that, and so we just need to get better.
Thank you, Councilor Allen.
Yeah, thanks for keeping me on FaceTime. I don't know why the Zoom link didn't work. Tried it 3 times, but thanks everybody for the info. I couldn't hear everything, but I could hear a lot of it, and appreciate the info. Look forward to hearing more at some point. Thank you for staying late.
Yeah, thank you for staying late. I'm hungry. I know you guys got to be hungry and tired, so I don't have any more questions, except if you could please send the PowerPoint to the whole council and work on the advertisement and getting the communications to us for public input. That would be fantastic.
We'll definitely get the presentation out ASAP, and we definitely will work on expanding the outlets in which we're advertising it.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you for your time.
You.
Great presentation too. Great work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.